Hi everyone, welcome to this amazing interview with the fabulous, lovely Ellie. Ellie is one of my clients. We've just finished our 12-week programme and she's agreed to come on and share her journey, kind of just how she's evolved, how coaching has helped her. She is an amazing woman, so tune in, get your seatbelt on because it's going to be a great ride. No pressure, Ellie.
A lot goes up to.
So, Ellie, if you can introduce yourself, just tell us a bit about yourself first, if you're happy to.
Okay, so my name's Ellie. I am 35. I'm a mum of two, so I've got two girls, and 7 and 3. Um, my kind of background and what I do is maybe a little bit unusual, or I'm very much in a male-dominated world. So I studied mechanical engineering. And since then, I've worked in manufacturing and industry. And more recently, I started in probably my biggest role ever. So I started in a role as a plant manager. So I run a plant of a few hundred people. So in a very, as I said, a very male environment. So that in itself comes with its own challenges, I'd say.
Wow. And tell us about this, like being one of a female leader in a male dominated environment. What's it like?
I think I think what it's like for me now versus what it maybe would have been like for me a few years ago is different. So I think I've been in a male dominated environment for ever since well, even my degree. I was the only female doing a master's in mechanical engineering. But you kind of don't notice it. And it's interesting because you're just you and you want to be recognized for you and what you bring. And it's almost like it's more, other people are more aware of it than you are because you're just you. You don't think about yourself as a male, as a female. You just think of you as a person. But actually, not being aware of that sometimes has its own pitfalls because what you don't realize sometimes that you're doing, or what I think I've done in the past, is you try and get by in that world by maybe trying to adapt yourself slightly. And I'm very good at adapting. I'm very good at being where I need to be to fit into a certain. But what I've found I found that very much very recently, that means I'm trying to play a role that's not necessarily me or true to myself. And what I've been really working on over the past, in particular the past few months, is how do I live and work in this environment, but how do I do it as me? How do I do it as, as a strong, independent woman, as a mum? How do I do that by leaning into those things that make me me, not maybe trying to be a bit more of what I'm not because that's what's normal or that's what's expected. How do I trust myself and my intuition and who I am, because that feels good. How do I do that and operate in this world? And I probably, until my self-awareness had increased and increased, I didn't even know that's what I wasn't doing. I thought I was just being me, but actually more and more signs kind of showed me that I wasn't following myself. I was trying to fit in. I was trying to adapt, and it's not something I want to do anymore.
Love that. I love that you've realised that now, like so empowering. Which leads me to the question of like, before we started this journey, where were you? Like, how were you feeling? What was your life like?
So I've been through, like most people, I suppose, a bit of a journey over the past 2 years in particular. So some real challenges hit me. So I started in a new industry just as COVID hit. I went through some personal issues, so some issues with family. I was suffering from burnout, and all those things kind of led me to having burnout and really having some panic attacks and some anxiety that I've never experienced before. And at that point, I knew I needed to do something different. So I knew that although work was stressful, work wasn't the problem. It was how I handled that pressure that was something to do with me and some real deep rooted traumas and some childhood and how I connect with myself. I felt like that's where the answer kind of was. So I went through some counseling that really helped me. And it really helped me with a lot of the deep rooted things. But when I came out of that, I wanted something different. I wanted to know, how do I become whole again? How do I become a person that uses all of this to then create what I want out of life? How do I thrive again? How do I be ambitious? And I was terrified that I couldn't be those things. I was terrified that, having got to a point where I felt so broken, I was a bit scared of, I don't know how I be me again, and how I want to be and achieve everything that I want for me, for my family. And so that's when I decided to start with coaching, because I was like, how do I get some help, some guidance, some mentoring, and how I put those pieces of the puzzle back together.
Love that. So it was like you knew something needed to change, so you went on this massive journey of self-discovery, and then got all this amazing self-awareness, and then was like, but what do I do with it? How does this transpire into my life now?
Exactly. It felt like, really, I learned things about myself through counseling that were life-changing. And that sounds really that sounds it sounds really extreme to say it was life-changing, but it was, because I went through things that changed my whole belief system of what I think and feel and how I frame life, really. And that changed me, and I didn't know what to do with it. The next steps didn't feel like counseling, because my counseling, we'd started talking about women's rights and things. It didn't feel like counseling. It was more, okay, now how do I use this? How do I become something from this? How do I emerge from it?
Amazing. So that's then where we
Yeah.
met again. And tell me then, what happened next for you, like when you started your coaching journey?
So I think, because I like, my background's engineering. I like science. I like practical. I like logical. So I'll be honest. I entered thinking, right, give me some things to do. Let's tick them off, and I'll be in a better place. And that's not how it works, or how it worked. And what I realized is, it made me do a couple of things. One of them was kind of slow down a bit so that I could go faster, but also it made the bit that I hadn't done from counseling, I didn't realize, was there was still a big piece that was about integration, and a big piece that was about even more self-awareness and self-compassion, and how to integrate that into my life. So it becomes all of those tools become how I integrate and use them to build building blocks from a really solid foundation. It's so, although in my head as I entered it, it was about practical, give me a to-do list. It's actually more practical, is how you practically put yourself back together, and also how you do certain actions and things that basically create the evidence that I needed to start creating new evidence, to start building on what I'd already done, so that I started having that belief again, but coming from evidence driven. And also this, I've always been in two minds about kind of manifestation, etc., but consistently doing these things in an environment where it kind of mentors, means you're more open to the things that come your way. So as soon as we started, there was 1 or 2 weeks where some things happened that I couldn't have imagined happening, and connections with people that I knew wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in this space. And it was about keeping that place and that space in my time that made me keep that focus, keep that energy, and make myself slightly accountable to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love how, from being such a logical person as well, especially with what you do, that you kind of, your perspective shifted a little bit, so you became more open. And it's not all about the spiritual woo woo, it's just about opening that energy up, isn't it? And allowing things to come into you.
Absolutely. And I think what I didn't realize is there was that bit extra to go. And even through the coaching that we've been done, I've had those light bulb moments of things. What it almost did was, there was things at the surface that were suddenly easier to get hold of. There were things about myself that I could understand quicker. It was like bringing it to a place where I could access it and then use it, but also access it, learn from it, and move forward, but in such a quick way that it means that I feel like I'm learning and progressing at a really fast pace, which is what I crave.
Yeah, it's you all over that, Elliot.
Um,
But what was interesting was every week when we'd come onto our session, like, and we'd review the week or we'd share your wins for the week, there'd always been something that had come up that had almost helped you, like, gain evidence of this, like what you've been processing, who you want to be. It's like this situation would arise, and it was like almost a test, wasn't it? Am I going to step up to be this person I want to be? And it was amazing how that unfolded at a really quick pace.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to describe, because it was like things came to test me, but I felt like I was able to meet it in a different place. And so, things that there'd be really what would feel like insignificant things happen that would make me better understand my whole self. So things that would happen that would trigger things from my childhood, for example, would then make me suddenly have these realizations. And what usually came with these realizations for me was a real unburdening. So, I grew up really independent. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. My parents split when I was really young, and there was traumas in that I'd not processed, that I felt like I had. But I realized I'd spent so long in my life trying to get away from it, to try and separate the two. And then I think in one session, which was really important for me, there was a session about integrating the kind of child self and my current self. And recently I listened to a podcast and they talked about something similar as well. And that integration piece helped me accept myself, who I am as well. I wasn't trying to run away anymore from a person or a child. I was trying to accept them as me as well. And all of those things, it's that kind of that healing that comes with having to feel it to be able to actually heal from it. I can read all the books that I want, and I read a lot, but unless I feel that and actually close that cycle, I can't move forward. And that's the bit where I was stuck. And that's what it's kind of helped me get through that stuck, so that I just feel I feel at peace, which is nice. So there's an element of calm, which is really what I feel like I was craving, this psychological freedom. But that then gives me a real platform to then be really ambitious again, and creative, and drive, and take more risk, because it comes from such a much more confident, safe place.
Absolutely, that's so powerful. And a lot of people come into a coaching space, like you say, thinking, right, I'm going to just tick tick tick, take action. And actually so much of it we do is healing work as well. Like you said, we did a lot of it was actually neuro-linguistic programming. We did NLP, where we go back and work on the inner child and help that inner child feel safe again. Because for everybody, we're all walking around with an inner child, and most people's inner child, there's some sort of wound or trauma there. It doesn't have to be like massive trauma, just not feeling safe as a child is a trauma. And until we kind of reassure that inner child that actually, I'm here, it's safe, I can hear you, that inner child can run us even as an adult. And so many people are walking around unaware that this is going on. But the fact that you became aware, and then we did that work on it, where we just, like you said, integrated them. Remember, we did that exercise. It's called NLP parts integration. And it was like a bit of a light bulb after that session, wasn't it?
It's so powerful for me, because when we did that, and kind of when you said about thinking about the child self and that time, and what do I think of, and for me, I then thought of my eldest child, who's 7 right now, and then in the other hand, the current was me now. And there was something, that image of seeing those two come together was really powerful, and something shifted. And the thing is, you don't know something shifted, you don't know it, and then the following days or weeks, things then happen that you feel differently about them. You frame them differently, because something inside you shifted, but you don't know it until these things come, and then you realize you don't feel the same way. And for me, so much of not feeling the same way was about not feeling as burdened, not feeling like, a bad person, not feeling like, everything that happens in the world is my fault. It's really freeing, it's really peaceful, but you don't you don't even know you need to do it, and that's what's so challenging.
Yeah, because so much of it, what we're running off, is the subconscious. So
Absolutely.
it's like, if you think of an iceberg, it's like 7/8 is underneath, and that's what we're running off. So when you go in and do that deep work, which can be done in 1 or 2 sessions with NLP, you know, that, and the rest of this 1/8 at the top, it just becomes like, it settles, you know, it's calmer, it's like, oh, okay.
And about, I think, a year or so ago, you and I spoke before you kind of started with this, and at that point, I wasn't where I am now or where I was when I entered into this, and you touched upon that because you mentioned to me that a year ago, I just wasn't in that place to see it. I just wasn't in that place to be aware enough because I was so busy trying to run at such a high level and cope that I wouldn't even allow myself to try and see it.
Mm.
And it would have had a different impact. But after the year of so much happening and so much going on, when I arrived at doing this and coaching, I was in a different place. And I think that matters. I think you know when you're at a place to accept and fully embrace something different and really lean into it, because that matters. Really allowing your whole self to be completely transparent and lean into something is really how you just maximize what you can get out of something when you're in that place.
Yeah, you've got such a valid point, because you have to be ready to do that work on yourself, because it's not an easy ride, is it? And I mean, what
Oh
would you
no.
say is like the biggest block, um, that arose for you?
So I think um for it feels, for me, what I've always struggled with is things that feel like counseling felt self-indulgent, which is crazy. It's my mental health. This felt self-indulgent. It got to the point where I'm choosing to invest in me, and I struggle with that. I struggle with that. Am I worth it? Do I deserve this? All of those things come into question. And then when I committed, and then, because it is hard, because although there's all of this positivity that comes out of it, and it does, the bit in the middle is painful and messy and upsetting, and at times it feels like, and I felt the same with counseling, sometimes you feel like you're picking at a scab. Like,
Mm.
why am I doing that? This hurts, this is painful, this is making me question my whole belief system that I've set my life on. And now I'm going, no, I'm willing to change and feel something different. That might change my relationships with myself. That might change my relationships with other people. That's really hard to be in that place, and it's painful. Um, but I was in a place where I felt like it was so necessary. It was like necessary pain because I didn't want to be stuck. I wanted to be the best me that I could ever be. And I knew I'd never be able to be that without going through something like this, without that work that's needed. I want to be the best mum I can be. I want to be the best business person that I can be, the best me. And for me, that's worth the pain.
Hmm. And you know, I always say, like, hands up to you for allowing yourself to go on that journey, and knowing that sometimes it is messy, painful, upside down, and you think, why am I doing this? But actually, you know what you're going to get from it, and what you start to get is so worth it than the pain of staying where you were.
Absolutely. What I also think as well is, sometimes we think, when we're trying to learn things and we think, well, I need to remember it. And these things aren't things you ever have to remember. So because you go through, things change and you change, you feel different. There is no having to remember, because you never forget those things. Once you've seen it, you don't unsee it. And so it just becomes part of you. So it's a shift that, yeah, you might change and shift again, but you don't shift back. You know what you know now, and you've learned it, and you can just move forward and change from there. So it's kind of permanent. It's that thing. It's a shift. It's different.
Yeah. Which leads us nicely to, what is life like now? How do you feel? What's shifted for you?
Yeah, and it, in some ways, because it feels very new, how kind of different I feel. Part of me still kind of, what I found really hard at the beginning was, I had this belief that if you have to work hard at everything, And I'm not saying you don't, but that it has to be hard. And if it's easy, you're doing it wrong. That it's not tough enough, or it's not worthy. That everything has to be hard. Like, you have to do things the hard way. And what I started to realize through this, which was a real shift for me, was, well, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the easy way is, it's easy because you're good at it. It's easy because it's what you're naturally aligned to. So for me, communication, people, understanding people and helping them grow, that I'm just good at and I love. And so I wouldn't lean into that, because I was like, well, then that's not worthy. It's supposed to be hard, so it must be wrong. And that real shift of, actually, no, it's okay for some things to be easier, to actually lean into them. And sometimes it's hard work, but it feels good and it's easy, and that's okay. That following that intuition of not trying to constantly be in conflict with myself because I'm telling myself it's supposed to be harder, so do the hard thing. That change, that balance and perspective it gives me is completely different. And it allows me to better set boundaries and expectations with people. And I went into this, my one big thing for years has been, how do I get balance and perspective? Like, how do I do that practically? And now I'm more in that place. So today's a great example of, I'm at work early, but that's because I've taken the afternoon off so I can go to my daughter's dance show. I've got a physio appointment this morning. I'm meeting with a external consultancy about health and safety. So I'm having a day of doing lots of things that I need to do, but I'm not feeling guilty because I've got the afternoon off to see my daughter at a dance show. I didn't feel guilty that I'm having physio this morning because I need physio. Kind of that balance, but being able to do the balance without me feeling like that means I'm not good enough, or, you know, I'm not as good as they are because I'm choosing to take the afternoon to see my daughter. Well, that's not because I'm not good. That's because I'm a human being. And actually, what I'm choosing for myself is this balance and this perspective. And also, not trying to hide it, trying to be really open with it, you know, telling people, I'm not here this afternoon for this reason. I need this meeting to finish at 12. And
yeah, absolutely.
you know, and testing those assumptions I have of people are going to judge me. And they don't, they're human too. And they go, that's nice, or that's great. Or they go, oh, she's human. We can resonate. We can probably have a more meaningful relationship because she gets it. And it's hard because every day I have to test that, because that inner bit of me is like, no, you've got to be perfect. You have to meet everybody's needs before your own. But the more I do this, the happier I am, the easier it is. And then I can tell myself it's okay for it to be easier and for you to be happy. It's not because you're doing it wrong. It's not because you're not good enough. It doesn't have to always be so incredibly hard.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so many people will get so much inspiration from that, because I think it's such a common thing as women, especially when you're a mum as well and you're doing the juggle between work, looking after yourself, family life, like feeling that guilt. Like, if I'm not giving enough to work, you know, if I'm not giving everything to work, then that will suffer. If I'm not giving everything to family, and actually that balance and perspective around that balance is key. And it's
Right.
like, honestly, I always say I'm in absolute awe of you, Ellie, because the shift you have had around this perspective around what balance looks like and feels like, and your self-worth is amazing.
And I do think that's why that bit, that, you know how I said it's a shift, because you kind of think, well, remember, Ellie, remember, but you don't. What's really nice is I don't feel the pressure of remembering how this feels or everything we've done, because the shift is inside me anyway. So the shift has happened. And so, yes, I need to keep working on it, but I don't have to, you know, have notes. I don't have to revise. I don't have to remember how to do this, because so much of it comes from you changing, that just the act of changing makes all of that more, you know, more available. So
Well, it's
that
almost you've rewired your brain almost, haven't you, to become more automatic to do these things, think these things, feel these things.
absolutely.
So just to finish off, if there's a lady watching who is feeling how you were feeling, like, you know, on the brink of burnout or feeling burnt out, trying to give to everybody, you know, doing the juggle, like what would what piece of advice would you give to her?
I would say the one thing I've always told myself is, when you're in that place where you feel like you don't have time for yourself or to do the personal development, or just that where you just don't have time, that's when you need it the most. So whenever you get to that point, that's when you should prioritize it. The time where you feel like you can least prioritize you is the time where you need it the most, and everything else comes from it. One thing I was told that I will never forget is, I wanted to work on relationships with other people, how I interact. And I was told the first relationship you need to work on is the one with yourself. And everything comes from that foundation and that anchor. And that's what this is. And you'll never go back from that. So if you can do that and be really open to it, there's only one way from that. So listen to yourself and your intuition, because you just choose to not listen to it. So when you feel like you're really conflicted with yourself, when you really feel like you just don't know where you are or where you stand, that's when you're not listening to yourself. And if you can just choose to do that, just that first thing of listening to yourself, your intuition, and stopping, everything else will come from there.
Love that. Such an amazing piece of advice. And it's like, sometimes that does feel counterintuitive to slow down and listen, doesn't it, when life is fast paced? But absolutely, I love that, what you say about, the most important relationship is the one with yourself, and that foundation, it's so key.
I think and we've talked about this a bit before, that I deal all the time I work in an engineering environment. It's about problem solving. It's about fix it fast. It's use your brain. It's all of that. And to work in that kind of environment and choose to stop and go, actually, I need to trust my intuition. Actually, I need to work on the relationship with myself, because everything else will come from it. It's almost like the opposite. I work in an environment where it encourages the absolute opposite. It's put more pressure on, make fire, and to work in that kind of environment and that influence, and choose to go, I need to do something here, I need to work on me to be able to do it. It's so hard. And I think so many of us feel that. The environments we're in don't go, listen to your intuition. They don't say, work on your relationship with yourself. They don't say any of those things. So absolutely, it feels completely counterintuitive. And so living and working in the environments we do and choosing to do something completely different feels alien. But when you then really start doing it, actually feels really right.
And it's going back to that feminine energy and
listening
to yourself, of going more with the flow, of self-trust, intuition. And we're living in a very masculine environment right now, and I feel there's definitely a rise in this, like they always say, this like divine feminine is coming up. And you're early to it, Ellie, you're getting there. I think that you're going to be an absolute change maker. You already are. But I hope, for the sake of our children, that this does become, it becomes part of life more, rather than this drive, hit a brick wall. It's not sustainable, is it?
I agree. And I think I almost hate saying this, and I don't know why I do, because I don't think I don't know, I don't think I've encouraged myself to say it before, but having kids was great for me, because it gave me this other purpose of wanting to create something different for them, to create a different world for them to walk into, where they can see something different and how it can be done. And I really want that for them. And I needed that so that I could want it for me. And ultimately, I needed to want it for me. But having kids helped me get to that. By wanting it for them first, it helped me realize, well, if I want it for them, I have to want it for me. And so that helped me. And that quote that we've talked about with Martin Luther King, where he said, and I'll get this wrong, so bear with me, but where those who love peace need to get as organized as those who love war. That's the point. We have to create structure and focus and energy around doing things in a different way. you know, that are more peaceful, that is more psychologically free, that all of those things. But that doesn't just come by wanting it. We have to be active in wanting it, in creating it.
And that is, I love what you say about the structure around that, because it doesn't just happen by going, oh, let's go with the flow.
Exactly.
You've got to create the structure to allow yourself to slow down, to, you know, listen to your intuition. You've got to create that, haven't you? So I love that, because a lot of people go, oh, you know, it's a bit too ooh for me.
Yeah, a bit flower power, a bit airy fairy. What are you talking about? This is hippie stuff. Like, okay, but and that's why I love that quote, because for someone who's so kind of has to have a plan, it made me go, yeah, like, yes, like you can do it that way, but you have to do all those other things around it. You've got to have the substance behind it. It's not just the words. It's we talk a lot. You talked a lot about the action. It is that there's got to be action there. It can't just be intent. The action's got to be there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellie, I could absolutely talk to you all
Yeah,
day, and I've loved our time together. Seeing you absolutely flourish and thrive is amazing. So just thank you so much for sharing this on this interview, and I think you'll inspired so many women. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
Oh, you're welcome. Guys, if you've got any comments you'd like to leave, any questions, feel free to pop them under the video or pop me a message. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.